Good day and welcome to the Lilly Roddy Show, coming to you from the LRS studios here in Houston, Texas. I'm so glad to have you join me today as we look at the larger influences of astrology in our daily existence. On today's show, we'll be looking at the highlights for the upcoming week of August 30th through September the 5th, 2015. We'll be continuing with our presidential candidate theme. Today we'll be looking at Joe Biden's chart, Mike Huckabee's chart, Vice President Joe Biden's chart, Mike Huckabee's chart, and Carly Fiorina. Sorry about that. And finally, in the end, I'm going to be talking about having 3 outer planets in mutable signs: Jupiter in Virgo, Saturn in Sagittarius, and Neptune in Pisces, and how they're currently affecting us. If you would like to get in touch with me to ask a question, share a comment, or book a session with me, you can always reach me at lilyroddyshow@aol.com, lilyroddyshow.com, or find us on Twitter, Pinterest, or Facebook. Well, let's take a look at the weekly overview. Now, the beginning of the week has a lot of Neptune influence, really starting on Saturday and lasting all the way through Monday. Generally, when Neptune is strong in the sky, we're all more inclined to want to keep our activities simple and especially to diminish the drama in our lives. This would be a great time to head out to the lake house or beach house to really get away from it all. First, we have the full moon on Saturday on August 29th at 6 Pisces. Of course, this is from the previous week. Neptune is currently at 8 Pisces retrograde, so you can see that this will make this Saturday, August the 29th, very Neptunish. And then on Monday the 31st, we have the Sun opposing Neptune. And adding just a little more energy to all of this is Jupiter's recent movement into Virgo. Jupiter opposes Neptune exactly on September 17th. Now, because we have so much Neptune influence in the beginning of the week, it's just going to make for a slow start, or we're just not going to want to put ourselves out there as much as maybe we think we should. When Neptune's energies are stronger, we are all just more psychically sensitive, and generally we retreat from the day-to-day activities, loud and crowded places, and from people wanting things from us. Neptune's energies respond better to spiritual retreats, time at the beach, listening to the waves, and trying to figure out where you fit in this big picture of life. And just to add a cherry on top of everything, on Tuesday, we have our longest and most significant void of course moon of the week. Now, we do start out Tuesday morning with Venus conjunct Saturn. That's certainly a time when we're all more self-centered and self-aware. And that's only amplified with this Venus retrograde. We'll be a lot more energized, but mostly interested in things that are solely important to us. So if you're doing things that you like, Tuesday morning can be a very productive time. If not, you will be especially unhappy. And adding more vegetables to the soup on Tuesday around lunchtime, the moon conjuncts Uranus as a solar eclipse, as an eclipse cycle. I know most people don't follow more than the solar and lunar eclipses of the moon, but the moon does eclipse the other planets. It would be supremely important to keep your lunchtime hour unscheduled and as unfettered as possible. We also have a long void of course running from the middle of the day on Tuesday through early morning on Wednesday the 2nd. If it was up to me, I would definitely have my activities planned for the latter half of the week, where things will be a lot smoother. Well, let's take a look at the candidates. And of course, as I said, we're looking at Vice President Joe Biden's chart, Carly, I wish I could say her name, Fiorina, and Mike Huckabee's chart. Let's start with Carly Fiorina. Her birth information is September the 6th, 1954 in Austin, Texas, but we don't have a time. Miss Fiorina is definitely a Virgo with Neptune and Venus in Libra, and her Saturn is in early Scorpio, and she has Moon in Sag, Mars in Capricorn. That's probably a little more information than you needed to know. She should definitely benefit from the action of Jupiter moving through Virgo, since she is a Virgo, and eventually into Libra because she has a nice Neptune and Venus in Libra. We're seeing this trend of the candidates that are the most visible or getting a lot of press are the ones that have planets in in Leo, Virgo, and Libra. Now, Jupiter, just to let you know, spends about a year in each sign. Jupiter entered the sign of Leo in August of 2014. Jupiter then entered Virgo in mid-August of 2015. And then Jupiter will enter Libra in August of 2016. So those signs are definitely going to be heavily influenced by Jupiter, which is traditionally a positive and upbeat kind of energy. So Miss Fiorina has a fairly positive looking chart, especially through the campaign time. And at election, she's going to definitely benefit from Jupiter moving through Virgo and into Libra. Now, she'll also be dealing with Saturn squaring her Sun, much like we saw with Bernie Sanders' chart last week. Bernie Sanders' Sun's at 15 Virgo, her Sun's at 13 Virgo. Now, that doesn't mean that Saturn would stop you. It just means that Saturn will be testing the integrity of the clients. But it does appear to me that Miss Fiorina, I wish I could say her name, can hang in there through the candidate selection process. And she might be a good choice for vice president for one of the more traditional Republican candidates, excluding Mr. Trump. So she has a pretty good chart. Not bad all in all. Let's look at Mr. Huckabee's chart. His birth date is August 24th, 1955, born in Hope, Arkansas, but we don't have a time. Mr. Huckabee has a load of planets in Leo and planets in Virgo. He is a Virgo. So you can see the continuation of this trend of Jupiter moving through Leo now into Virgo. He does have Moon in Scorpio, and he also has Saturn in Scorpio. So both he and Miss Fiorina have just had their second Saturn return, so they're both around 58 years old. Now, the second Saturn return is often a time where people realign their career, and particularly at this time in our human existence, and especially in America, this is a time frame where people take on sort of a new career. So this is not actually a very good time for both of them because of that. Mr. Huckabee's chart does seem fairly good through August of next year, but he does seem to lose a lot of the Jupiter influence because he doesn't have very many planets in Libra. He does have a nice Saturn trining his Jupiter, and that'll be going on through the election. I don't think that's enough energy to drive him forward. And to point out the similarities of the candidates' charts, Mr. Huckabee has Mars in Leo, just like Mr. Trump, just like Ms. Clinton, and just like Mr. Carson. So, Ben Carson. So, all these people have Mars in Leo. That must be a significant factor for us as Americans, something that we're drawn to. Now, at election time, Mr. Huckabee's chart doesn't seem as strong as some of the other candidates. He still may have some sway as they get to the Republican convention, and then we'll see who Mr. Huckabee's support goes to when they start coming down to candidate selection. And now for Vice President Biden's chart. He was born November 20th, 1942 at 8:30 a.m. in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Vice President Biden is a Scorpio with 4 planets in Scorpio, all in the 12th house. He has Sagittarius rising. He also has Neptune in Libra in his 10th house. Although he does have Pluto in Leo, really the only place that Virgo shows up, which is a very positive place, is it shows up on his 10th house cusp. So it doesn't appear to me that Vice President Biden is going to be getting the same kind of strong Jupiterian influence that the other candidates seem to be having. Now, another thing is that Vice President Biden is about to have Saturn conjunct his ascendant and oppose Saturn in his natal chart. Often this kind of transit indicates a change in one's career direction, and that doesn't sound like he would continue in politics. And I think this theme is also repeated because Uranus will square his Jupiter just about the time of the election, and with Jupiter rising, ruling his ascendant, I would want to interpret that as him pulling out of politics and possibly taking some time for retirement. So his chart, although I could see he has some visible interest, he has planets in Leo, it still doesn't have enough strength. Also, I want to note that in common, Vice President Biden, Ms. Clinton, Mr. Walker, all have a lot of Scorpio in their charts. And in fact, all of the candidates seem to have a strong amount of planets in fixed signs. And those fixed signs are Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, or Aquarius. However, I don't really think that Vice President Joe Biden is going to be a viable candidate, especially at election time. Now, I just want to make a brief comment on Ms. Clinton's chart. Through the end of November 2015, Saturn will be conjuncting her Jupiter and squaring Ms. Clinton's midheaven at 5 degrees Pisces. Her natal Saturn is in her 3rd house, house of communications. It seems that her problems with her emails will only get worse. After the end of November, when this transit is done, maybe this topic will fade from the media's attention. So media's attention. So we're not really sure how that's going to work out, but I can tell you is that this is certainly going to put a lot of emphasis on what's going on with her life. That is the influence of Saturn, the judge, whenever she influences anyone's chart. And of course she's going to influence everybody's chart during the time of the election because so many of them have so many mutable planets. Even Mr. Trump, who is a Gemini, will be influenced by Saturn's movement. And let's remember that our first President Bush was a Gemini as well. Both Mr. Trump and Mr. Sanders' charts, Bernie Sanders, continue to remain strong, and they should really be gaining continued support through this time frame. So I don't expect really the other candidates to sort of catch up with them for a while. It may be really end of the year before before most of the Republican candidates begin to catch up with Trump's momentum. And now for my third section, I'm going to talk about Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune in mutable signs. Currently, we have Neptune in Pisces, Jupiter in Virgo, and Saturn getting ready to re-enter Sagittarius on September the 17th. Each of these planets has a particular effect. For example, Saturn, planet of boundaries, is re-entering the sign of Sagittarius, the sign of foreigners. So it's obvious to see that immigration is going to be a big topic for the next couple of years. This is where the idea of wanting to build a wall comes from, Saturn ruling boundaries. And of course we can see how well the Wall of China worked for them. On a more practical approach, Saturn would want a solution rather than to continue to ignore the immigration problem. So in some ways, it's probably a good thing because it'll bring some kind of resolution, whether or not we're all happy with that. Neptune brings on the point of view that these are people who are suffering, and we should want to reach out to them simply because it's part of our spiritual and religious beliefs. An example of this would be the cities that have a safe place for illegal aliens to go. Jupiter in Virgo wants to take on the view of how these immigrants and illegal aliens are an integral part of our workforce. So you can see how each one of those planets is pulling and sort of pushing its own point of view. Another example of Saturn squaring Neptune is the drop in gasoline prices. In astrology, Neptune rules the gas and oil business, and Saturn could certainly be limiting the value of Neptune. Hopefully we'll reach the limit of that toward the end of November when Saturn and Neptune make their last contact. Another example of the Saturn-Neptune square is the increased reports of the police targeting minorities. Sagittarius rules the legal system, and with Saturn in Sag, they're going to be taking a hard look at the overall legal system and what rules are used and applied. I mean, we're already seeing some of this happen, just yesterday. And Saturn-Neptune square could also increase the whole conversation around the problems with our educational funding system, since Sagittarius rules higher education. Under the influence of Jupiter in Virgo, I think they're only going to find more examples of legalized bigotry and prejudice in our legal system. I don't think that we often think about this, but Jupiter does rule the idea of prejudice and xenophobia. As you can see, there's going to be some very divergent point of views as these three different signs are influencing us. If you are a mutable sign or have planets in mutable signs, this is going to be a very busy 2016. You could easily feel overworked, underappreciated, and wondering where your personal boundaries are. We can already see that with Jupiter's entrance into Virgo, getting closer to make contact with Neptune on September 17th. Here in Houston, we've seen the physical effects of that, of having more wet weather. Remember, Houston's a Virgo city with planets in Pisces as well. We also have Moon-Neptune conjunction in Aquarius, which is also part of our water element that we have here in Houston. On next week's show, I hope to talk more about the current events and also what's going on with the stock market. I want to thank you for joining me this week as I talk about my favorite topic of astrology. This is the Lilly Roddy Show, coming to you from the LRS studios here in Houston, Texas, reminding you to keep those stars in your eyes. Bye-bye.